So Rob, thanks very much for coming along today.
Pleasure.
Big thanks from everybody in Guildhall Young Artists.
Yep.
That's the credit over and done with. And now here I go asking you the big question. How did it start for you, this thing?
Okay, so 9 years old I started playing the clarinet, and 12 years old started playing the piano. Initially I really wanted to be a clarinet player. I was obsessed with that. And I managed to find myself at 16, I was in the National Youth Orchestra as clarinet. But I was number 7 out of 10. And I realised actually that my long cherished ambitions to play in the proms was not going to happen. So, and I only lasted one term. They kicked me out, I think for bad behaviour. And I think I realised at that point that my clarinet dream was slightly over, because the difference between me at number 7 and number 1 was so different. And I thought, I'm going to be meeting these people at every audition. I felt a bit discouraged. I was quite academic. I went to university, did an English degree, which I'm really happy I did, because a lot of directors and so on have kind of been through that same process. And in terms of being able to read and analyse scripts, that proved really good. But all from the beginning, also from 14, I played in bands. Punk bands, new wave bands, everything, right the way through. And after university, I carried on being in a band, and I wanted that to go somewhere. And after 5 years, got a publishing deal, but it didn't really quite come off. So at 26, 27, I'm sort of like wondering what to do with my life. The band isn't going to work out. I love being in music, and I was luckily told by the producer of the band. I was suggested by this my friend Mike, who was producing the band. He said, "Why have you thought of doing media and TV music? Because the very thing that's wrong with your band, as in there are too many different influences, it keeps changing direction. So this could be very good for film and TV." And he asked, and it's literally like the light bulb went on, and I realised, yes, a very broad church. I'd sort of done classical training. I played in quite a lot of jazz bands, studied a bit of saxophone, and then of course I'd done played in a sort of pop soul band for 5 years, and learned quite a lot about early. It was the days of Atari. And so I suddenly kind of got this kind of thing of, this is what I want to do, and I'm 26 at this point. Okay, so and I auditioned for the National Film and TV School, and they said to me, "We don't normally accept people without a degree, but we'll have a look." And I got in, and that was great. And then I spent 3 years there, and basically I spent 3 years in it was cabin 3 in the music department, and I spent 3 years. I barely went home, and it was at a period of the time where there was a lot of postgraduate students who had long outstayed their welcome, and Henning Camray, the new head of the film school, really wanted them to move on, and so me and another guy, Simon Whiteside, who was my colleague in that year, we just had lots and lots of short films to do. I think I did 30 short films while I was there. The big thing that got me to into the profession really was, I think everybody needs a lucky break, and we can talk about how you get that break. But mine actually came before I went to film school. A friend of mine said to me, knowing that I was going on this journey, said, my ex-girlfriend is producing a short film for Channel 4. You should get in touch with her. So I got in touch with her, and I ended up doing a short film just before I went to the National Film and TV School, which was for Channel 4's Short and Curlies, which were intended as a sort of 10-minute short film calling card for the director. And that worked out well. And this director, Benjamin Ross, came back to me in the second year of film school and said, "I've got my first feature off the ground," this is in 1994, and it was a film called The Young Poisoner's Handbook. And so I was in a really lucky and good situation that at film school I was just sort of thrown in the deep end and had to write my first score for a feature film. And you know, when you're doing that, and it looks like there's some momentum in what's going on, you know, agents get interested, and I managed to secure an agent pretty much straight out of film school. And again, what they did at that point, and I think everybody needs it, is just to get you through the door of a couple of I had 2 interviews which really set up particularly my TV career. And so, you know, I was introduced to a producer at the BBC who had seen the Young Pointers Handbook. They liked the score, and they were willing to take a chance on me. And it was really from there that they sort of took a chance on me on a completely different project. It was a sort of family drama called Close Relations. And Kate Harwood at the BBC ended up introducing me to quite a few other directors. Like I worked with Joe Wright on Charles II, and as importantly, I worked with Tom Hooper as well. She introduced me to Tom, and we got on really well. And
You know what I take from a lot of what you say? There's a little iconic thing you say, which is you stayed in a room for a long time. So I take from that there's a thing called hard work, is there not?
I did work incredibly hard.
Is it obsessive, or is it?
I think it. I would say that I'll be honest in the sense that for me it came out of a kind of personal crisis. You know, I'd kind of been to university. I'd also done an MA in Latin American Studies. I'd been in a band. Here was an opportunity to go back to film school. It felt to me like, you've got to get a life. You know, it's like, so I kind of had a bit of a messianic determination to, I am going to do this come hell or high water. And so, yes, I did work very hard. And that's absolutely part of it. And most of the people that I know or have seen succeed in the business all have that drive and determination. And I suppose, you know, the more you're doing, you know, the more other people see your work. So for a while, I was doing a lot of short films. I was doing short films at the National Film and TV School, and of course, other students would see it. And you know, I'd do some work for the London International Film School or something like that. So and so, but it was really a combination of that. There was a lucky break, I suppose, which I sometimes think, well, if that hadn't happened, then that hadn't happened. You know, and so I think, you know, with young composers, you're constantly trying to look for the opportunity to sow a seed that might then...
Well, how about I paraphrase one of the questions that one of my young people posed? Well, I'll paraphrase it. It goes like this. This person is 14 years of age and would like to be in this seat asking you, what advice would you give to the 14-year-old Rob Lane?
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, from my point of view, at 14... I started this process at 27, so I'm pretty impressed you even want to start at 14. Yeah, that's pretty on it. I would say, for me, there are several things. I wrote them down here. First is study, right? So you've got to know the landscape that you're writing for. Presumably, if you want to write music for film or TV, you've heard something that you love. Okay, in my case, I can still remember the day I bought Jeff Love's orchestra version of Jaws and the Towering Inferno. And even though I didn't know that I was going to write film and TV music, I was switched on to those scores by John Williams in the 70s and so on. If this person has you know, they've clearly been switched on by hearing something, then push forward with that and learn about those pieces, study them, transcribe them, try to play them on the piano, even if they're easy piano versions of your favourite themes. Get this music sort of under your fingers, and which is an impossible job, but I think you have to know the landscape. You can't be a film and TV composer if you don't know the context that you're writing in, you know. So it's, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to be a film composer and so on, I will often want to ask them, so what was the last score that you really loved? And it's disappointing if somebody doesn't have an answer for that. You know, because it's like, what is it that's inspired you to do this? So that's one thing. Study. And I think jazzers have they have this idea, don't they, of like assimilate, which would be study. Imitate. Maybe innovate. It's like that kind of thing of like, you know, people, if they want to know about bebop, they spend an awful lot of time transcribing John Coltrane solos. They assimilate the language endlessly. And then maybe 5 years down the line, you might be in a position that you're doing something that's more like you. I think it will just develop. Yeah. And the other thing I was saying was always kind of, I would say, on the other hand, you're going after this, you're trying to understand, transcribing your favourite scores by Ennio Morricone or whoever it is, and you're loving that. At the same time, it's about watching a lot of stuff, I think, and developing the judgment of what is more original or interesting to you, and going after maybe that, and what brings out the best in you, because film music is a weird thing where there are always echoes of other people's work in the temp score, in what people have done before you in a genre, but at the same time, producers and directors are always saying, what are you going to bring that's new to this? And sometimes that's a really difficult question to answer. But every now and again, there is work by people that totally changes the game on something. So, like, for a while around the early 2000s, every temp score that I ever came across on a TV score was American Beauty, right? Which is a genius score, and which completely transformed the way that people thought about, if you like, suburban drama. I mean, it was no one else had done a score with marimbas. Now you can't use them, but people will produce these game-changing scores every now and again, and the question is why. When they have assimilated, they have imitated. Yeah. Why did he innovate then? What caused that? And I think you've just got to be alive, I think, to the process of what's been written, and then when somebody does a game-changing score to an action genre piece like Dune or something, or raises the bar, you have to be aware. You have to be aware of these.
Yeah, Steve Reich said about minimalism, it was in the air. Yeah. So I like that. Yeah. So maybe you've got to...
I think you have to be taking the air. Yeah. You can't. Nobody could be writing in a vacuum. Otherwise, you would still. Yeah, it would become too self-enclosed. And I think the final thing to this 14-year-old is if you get the chance to work with directors, cherish that. And I've got a rule for myself, which is always do the note.
Oh yeah, okay.
Always do the note. Learn to take that criticism, and always do the note, even if you hate the idea of it and you think you've written the best piece ever. Yeah. Try and do the note and see where it takes you. Because actually, the director might change their mind. Actually, they might, and they often do. They might sort of send you down a path and then go a week later. Actually, I do prefer the first version that you wrote, because it's when you do these scores, you are writing and collaborating with other people, and that process is difficult.
I've written a lot of ballet scores, and what you always do with ballet scores is you write a lot of music. Yeah. And they say they love it, which is always very nice of them. Yeah. And then they get better at dancing it, so they want it shorter. Right. Because they're quicker at dancing and I'm slower at writing. Right. So nowadays, if ever I get a ballet score, I always write something shorter, just to fit. Right. Yeah. You've learned to taken a long collaboration. Time. And collaboration is a difficult thing, and there'll be a lot of times as a film and TV composer where you're asked to do something that you don't instinctually agree with. Yeah, got it. I mean, you can make a massive fuss. You can throw your toys out of the pram. You could probably even win the argument, right? But you probably won't be invited back. Yeah, and you won't grow. Yeah, and sometimes it's worth doing the note. Yeah. Sometimes it's a total cul-de-sac. Yeah. But so I've developed this thing of like, always do the note. Okay. Yeah. This now would seem a good time for you to do another kind of note, which is to interact with a real-life human being who writes music. I'd like to introduce you to somebody. His name's Sam Story. Okay. So here we go. Hey, hi Sam. I'd like to introduce you to Rob Lane. Rob Lane is Sam Story. Jeffrey. So hey, tell us about yourself.
I'm Sam. I'm a third-year film music student here at the Guildhall. I've been surrounded by music my whole life, really, and it was I was never going to do anything but music, but I didn't know exactly what sort of music that was going to be. Mm-hmm. My first I'm a singer really. From young age, been in choirs, did a lot of theatre, and sort of little did I know, doing all of that sort of led me to film, but in a direction that I didn't really know was going to be the direction until I was sort of really aware of cinema and film.
Has it been a good journey so far? You've enjoyed it?
I've really enjoyed my journey. I mean, it's taken me lots of places. You know, the same, always do the note. I've been doing things that I didn't know I was going to be wanting to do, joining choirs that I didn't necessarily want to join, singing music that I'd never sung before, but cherishing all those opportunities has sort of, you never know what you're going to learn from each one. And I guess that as a whole set of experiences has sort of led me to now, when I went, great, well, cinema, actually, I like film and I like all this music, how can I put myself into this? And you know, that's where I'm at now.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to you good guys, because I bet you've got something to share with us.
I do. Well, why don't we start with something I've done at the Guildhall is work with other directors. So they do partner you up with film schools, and you meet a director for the first time, and you go through that whole process many times with lots of different short films. But again, you never know where that's going to
sort of spotting, talking about the music.
So we will. The way I've done it often is partner with the director, and I always like to start it with a phone call or a face-to-face meeting, because there's really nothing like that. And I think for us to get our ideas together, meet straight away, spot the film, really think about what I can bring to them, what they can bring to me. So here's an example of the first big short film, I guess, that's been put into festivals.
And what was that called?
It's called The Boogeyman.
Okay.
And it's a horror/thriller, but not too horrific.
Okay.
If I take it from a little scene here. So this is, he's looking for a camera that he can go and find the monster that he believes is in the house. And
this young boy.
This young boy. So that's where we're going to go.
I'm scared already, man.
So I think what this one really taught me was less is more. That's really what I learned from this project. I think, you know, when you go into it, and it was kind of my first, I'd like just joined second year, and I'd just had a great year of like, oh my goodness, I'm writing so much music. And I was really excited to get sort of all of me into it. And I wrote a bigger score, and then compromise, take it down. And you sort of realise that actually,
I mean, you know, I think that is always a debate. You know, less is more. Sometimes more is more. You know, I mean, I'm not just being deliberately contradictory, but I think, you know, you could see that. I mean, different composers in different times, and you know, contexts would score this very differently, and that there is no one right way to do it. It will really depend on the brief that you've been given by the director. But you know, if this had been Jerry Goldsmith's Poltergeist, you know, there would have been the number of gestures, for example, might have been quite stronger. I noticed one point where you came down the stairs and he looks up to that, and I would have been tempted to have had. It depends what the director's saying to you. The director was saying, I still need it to be more frightening. There might have been a sort of, because obviously the music can add that so much. You know, I would have been tempted to have kind of had a surge to that look with something hanging, maybe. But that's perhaps not what your director asked you for. So if your director is happy with that, because, you know, we can talk about the degree of dissonance, you know. I thought it was very good. I thought it was very nicely done. I liked the way that you picked up. You know, what you were doing is attaching musical gestures, quite minimal musical gestures, but you were still attaching them to moments. Yep. So, you know, when we see the camera, you brought in a high string and so on. You know, different directors and different composers will have different tastes on how dissonant this was going to be. It wasn't that dissonant.
No, really.
Was that deliberate?
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's early on in the film, so
Yeah,
I think I wanted to save some, and I have sort of saved a lot more dissonance for the end. But again, it's right, you know, it's all compromised with the director and what style they're looking to go for. And
could I ask something as a non-film person from the point of view of ignorance? Okay, so I'm a listener, right? Where does sound design start and stop, and where does music start and stop?
Well, with this film, the first thing I did was decide my sound palette.
Got it.
From the view that the brief had given, which was very much don't overdo it, don't overbear the film, and that's a
how many times have you heard that?
That is a common one. And you know, if I could have had a symphony orchestra, I probably would have. But so, you know, I'll decide certain instruments that will, you know, the sort of pizzicato, sort of plucky synth that I used. You know, that was the first instrument that I chose for this because, you know, he's a kid. You know,
got it.
It's adventure for him, and that just kind of spoke to me about that. But equally, having, you know, a high string, obviously that has horror connotations as well.
Well, it was more just, I mean, actually it just pointed out something. It didn't particularly make me feel like literally any moment something terrible was going to happen to him, but it was about attaching, you know, that's what you're often trying to do, and it becomes a sort of second nature and a personal thing as well, of how you attach musical gesture to images, you know, because otherwise it can just be a drone, you know, and it's just that there's not enough, and the amount of activity. So I pointed out that look there, you know, that you could have done that, or not. Maybe it's not important, you know. It's all just like what the narrative. What you've kind of agreed is the narrative importance, you know. So there'll be sometimes, you know, when I'll do a cue and a director will say, you've missed a trick on that. I need that pointed up, or, you know, and other times when people will say, it's fine, but it's too heavy-handed. You've done too much. You've done it too early, you know. So yeah, that seemed to me like a well-judged cue in the context of the kind of minimalist world that we currently live in. It's not one I entirely approve of, or necessarily agree with, but it's certainly the fashion at the moment.
Hey Sam, have you got any other clips that maybe sit in another space?
I think I do. So another thing, obviously, as well as the great opportunities to work with directors, and, you know, I've done a musical, I've done that, the short films. You know, that's really good. But also, in terms of just getting my technique down, you know, last year I did a lot of work on pastiche. So as you were saying, really immersing yourself in certain styles to be able to glean what you take, and then 5 years down the line, I might be able to take that bit of influence and run with it and go somewhere else. So last year I did a pastiche of Bernard Herrmann's famous Send More from Vertigo. And obviously that is like the unpasticheable cue, and you don't ever want to ruin what he's done. But I'd say I tried to have a good go.
Good go, yeah, absolutely.
This is with live orchestra, so
fantastic.
The Guildhall really
bless them.
Great for me to have a professional orchestra multiple times a year,
right,
where our certain projects, whether it be for real world projects or just for an exercise like this, allows me some time to conduct. Conduct it myself.
You conduct it. So you conduct it to click, or
so it's conducted to click. But
and was it mocked up? What do you mock it up on Logic or something?
Yeah, so I use Logic with sampler instruments, and then I'll create a click track and the orchestra.
Perfect.
So here we go. So I'll just play you a little bit of it. Yeah, that's it.
Very good. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Very good. I mean, I thought what I really liked and admired about that was that you still had that sort of aching Wagnerian language. And I was thinking you started with a dee da, and obviously the Herman goes da dee, and you found a way to not do that. So that was a very but still within the same musical language. And again, in the same way of pinning, musical gestures to, because so much of what we know about it also comes from this sort of operatic language. I really like the way that when James Stewart is turning round, your violins are going up and up and up, and it's sort of, you're building that, using those kind of things, and then delivering on the picture was really, really well done, really well done. So yeah, that was a very commendable pastiche. Great.
Thank you.
Great.
From my point of view, I was totally distracted. I just wanted to listen to the music, and I wondered whether you were going to do another tertiary modulation again. And by golly, you did. So obviously, I have a disease known as music listening and not movie watching.
But it was, again as well, you understood that thing in Herman of of these small cells, dee da 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 dee, and it's staggering how direct a lot of his writing was. Always was. These big late romantic gestures, and just there was no beating around the bush. It's just nailed, and I think that's something that I still love in film music. That determination to decide a gesture and commit to it. There's something about committing to it that makes it very powerful. I think when I talked earlier about whether I approve of the minimalist thing, I mean, absolutely, I do. I mean, my probably one of my favourite pieces of all time is Harmonium by John Adams, and but minimalism sometimes in film and TV music at the moment can mean perhaps not enough commitment sometimes to take the picture by the horns and wrench it as you did there. And that's that is more is more. Whereas would this now in a minimalist context would this now be a sort of careful, possibly even tepid alternation between D minor and B flat major first inversion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, which Pat Metheny said was the defining modulation of our age, which is like, what's the minimum you can do?
Yeah.
Right? Raise that A to a B flat. You know, it's a Philip Glass technique, obviously, but you know, it's like sometimes it does make me ache a little bit for this kind of approach.
Yeah. So Rob, is this because this is for a contemporary? Are you saying that the movie music is of its age?
I'm saying absolutely it's of its age, in the sense that of fashions, we don't write... I mean, you know, when Max Steiner scored King Kong, he really did go dun dun dun, you know, and he meant it, and he used the diminished sevenths, and what you find is then that tails away, and we would be unlikely to write that, and you know, there are examples of great scores. For example, Gabriel Yared's amazing score to Troy that was dismissed by a test screening audience for being old-fashioned.
Yeah.
What is it that's old-fashioned about it? And what is it that is new-fashioned about James Horner's replacement score written in 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Well, the answer probably is too much counterpoint, too florid in its orchestration. Everything has been reduced. It's a bit like the fashion is that we're worn out with these kind of gestures, right? And we just don't want to be told. I hear this all the time. I don't want the music to tell me how to feel. It's like music's always telling you how to do that. I don't want to hear the music. No, I'm sorry. I always want to hear the music, right? Music can only affect you if it's heard. Okay, so I'm a kind of rather passionate believer in the power, the power of music, and I just think, you know, I'd be very intrigued to see how this would be played now. You know, even some of the period dramas that I've done, you know, like say Jane Eyre in the early 2000s, you know, would probably not be scored in that same way, and that was I did it, I thought, in quite a modern way at the time, but now it would probably be a synth score, or kind of, there would be this thing of like, we've heard all that. See, this is the thing, people come to you and they go, we want something completely different, and it's of course, like most music never is completely different. The films that you're scoring isn't completely different. It's still celluloid, it's still people having a kiss or whatever, and so it's just an interesting debate, and I want to keep that debate alive. Is less more? Or is more? You know, and it's quite interesting to see that in your work there, that you've got examples of both. And I think it should be, I think it should always remain a discussion.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's why I really value having been able to really dive into Herman. And before scoring this, you know, I listened to the whole of the Vertigo score many times.
And people are still doing, you know, the famous piece where dum da dum 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 da dum 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 dum. You know, people are still using those chords to I use them in the Young Poisoner's Handbook. I learned them, I transcribed them because I needed to know about that, because it just seemed to me that music fitted so brilliantly. And you know, those chords are still being used to kind of vamp kind of, you know, tense moments when not too much is going on. He solved something with those, and we're still looking for a way for the next one. You know, so I think it's about assimilating I think it's about assimilating the past and being aware, particularly of the giant shoulders that we kind of write with, but then also being just as aware of, yes, the director wants less.
I think we have time for another if you have.
Okay, yes. Well, let's try and go with someone in the middle. So another great thing we do at Guildhall is we have a weekly, what you can do, sign up for a weekly Skype call with a composer who is working in LA.
Wow.
And, you know, he's really in the industry and gives you proper insights, and he will go, I'm literally right now on this job, here's the story of, you know, and that's a really get a completely different sort of anecdotal side.
Great gig, huh?
And he sets his exercises of things that he's done in the past. And this is a short film about...
Who was the composer?
Stephen Endelman.
Right,
So this one is a short film. It's quite abstract, but it's about a puppeteer.
Right.
I mean, but the bigger film is sort of making a statement on how does art live on, and he eventually the puppeteer sort of transforms into the puppet of himself, and he will live on through the generations. But here's a little scene where he's sort of down on his luck, and he's been ridiculed in the street for his mediocre puppet displays.
And what were you asked to do?
We were asked to score the whole film. Open brief.
Oh, okay.
So I think here's a sort of middle section where he's deciding to start making the puppet of himself.
Okay.
Probably a good place to start.
I thought that was really nice. I liked the pattern that you had very much, and I think if I'd been the director, I might have asked you to bring out the heads of the model, perhaps twice. I mean, I don't know the context of the film, but I felt like you had the sort of the kind of the process music, the dee da 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 that was really good, very nicely done, very nice sounds. Of kind of him working it, that was the kind of music of concentration, and then the kind of the violins were kind of coming through the dissonant. There was a dissonant collision there, which was really good, but it didn't quite, for me. I wasn't in the end. I was thinking, oh, this is building to something, and then I didn't know quite what it built to. Yeah. So in that sense, I might have kind of wanted to experiment with you to see what that might have meant if you'd built that to a kind of shing kind of thing on the little head of himself being revealed, and then later when you track in again, very nicely done. But you go to a head and there's a pull focus, which I would have been tempted to pin a gesture to.
Yeah.
So again, more.
Yeah.
But then that's all dependent on, is that what the story is being told? I thought it was an effective and very nicely produced cue. It's all in what is that story telling me, Because there was at the end, there was the kind of he started shaking. I think perhaps the music could have kind of scored that a bit more directly and quickly. And then again, it's like when it goes to black, maybe it just pans out into reverb, and that is bang on the cut. Is that kind of accuracy that can have this impact of just feeling like the music's even more glued to picture. But I thought it was very good. Really nice.
It makes me feel that film composers have to be resourceful. Rather resourceful. Not just resourceful, but resourceful.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. Yes, you absolutely. It's a bit like I sort of think of it as like you're writing music that you want to stand away from the picture and be effective, and you're sometimes sort of swooping stuff up.
Yeah, got it.
So you might be establishing a pattern whereby you can then go the ching on that. Yeah. That is almost like you're scooping up the image as you go along. You're kind of pulling it into your musical orbit. But so there you have three very nicely, as you say, one quite minimalist, one full-on pastiche, and one sort of more in the middle. And every project requires something different and different levels of intensity. But you're kind of clearly starting to develop some personal shapes and ways of doing things, which is really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now would seem a good time to conclude. And to say thank you to Sam from Guildhall Young Artists, and thank you to Rob from Guildhall Young Artists.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Okay,
cheers
Sam.